Aloha, aloha, aloha. Good evening and welcome back. And as always, thank you if you've been with us for the most of the day and the last couple of days. I hope you've kind of found the sessions useful, insightful. I hope they've given you some kind of inspiration as well. Before I announce our big guest, I'm really excited. I'm going to be a bit honest with you guys. I'm a little bit nervous. I was doing all right until about a kind of maybe after the last session, I thought I'm going to sit down and really get into this interview and started reading up about Paul, and it made me really nervous when I saw how wonderful his career is and the types of people that he's worked with. So, you know what I mean? This is going to be a really amazing chat, and I would really, really encourage you, as always, but definitely on this one, is to load up the chat with questions, comments. This is an amazing opportunity. It's rare that we get such an illustrious, such an experienced producer with us. So let's take full advantage. Before I introduce Paul, Lily, do you want to jump on and just give us our usual housekeeping, quick tour around Air Meets? Everybody knows what to do and everybody knows how to utilize facilities to the maximum. Thank you.
I do. Thank you very much. Yes, hello, my name's Lily. I do all the ops. And hello to those of you who are new to us today in this session. For those of you who have been with us this week so far, you'll hear it again. So a few tech things. I would like to turn your attention to the top bar. It's the black screen at the top of your black bar, even the top of your browser. As you can see, it says TV Collective Live in the top left-hand corner. And then we move to the first button. It says Schedule. Here you will see all sessions that are at the TVC Live Festival, past, present, and future. So you can add some of these sessions to your calendar as a calendar reminder. If there are any sessions you've missed, you can replay them. It will just open up in a new tab inside your browser. A few buttons over, I'd like to turn your attention to the people icon. It's those two little people. And if you click on that, you can see everybody who's attending the festival. You can also switch it to everybody online right now. And when you look at these people's profiles, you will also see underneath there a little speech bubble and a little square with a plus sign on it. The speech bubble allows you to direct message that person, and the next one over, the little square, requests 10 minutes of their time via a calendar invite, and that goes directly, the DMs go directly to your account, that's what I'm looking for, on the festival platform. The calendar request goes straight to that person's email. And unfortunately, as admins, this is a feature of AirMeet. We couldn't turn it off. So surprise, Paul. That also includes Paul. So please obviously use very responsibly.
Or not. Or not.
Or not.
I'm teasing.
But obviously, as we say at the TVC here, your network is your net worth. That is why we are having this festival, to bring us together, to celebrate our community and to make those connections. If I could then turn your attention to the menu down the right-hand side of your screen, the grey one, that is our in-session menu. So we start at the top, the speech bubbles with nothing in them is the chat. So you can just type in there and say hello and get to know the other attendees. Beneath that is the QA speech bubble. If you have a question for Paul or Simone during the session, I'm moderating, so please put that in there for me so I don't get lost in the source of chat. And if there are any resources or links that Paul or Simone refer to during the session, I will find them and I will put them in the resources tab, which is the second icon from the bottom. It's the two little pages. And that's my bit. Thank you very much.
You're wonderful. You should be an air hostess, that kind of like the doors are here, the exits are that. You're doing amazing. Thank you. Thank you so much, Lily. Thank you, all of you guys joining. I can see loads of people streaming in. Thank you, Gina from Paris. Hey, Gina. Good to see you from LA. And please put your name in. Give us a shout if you're in the room. It's lovely to know that we're here. And sometimes it feels like we're talking into a void. So to get that interaction is really important. Without further ado, I want to introduce Paul. It's so fantastic to have you. Paul Gaines is a Columbia University graduate and has produced and managed projects for Disney, DreamWorks, HBO, ABC, NBC, BET, Sony, and Paramount. He was the VP of Operations and Productions for Jamie Foxx's Fox and King Productions and head of productions for Simmons and Lathan Media. He was recruited by Taylor Perry in 2006, and Paul Garnes served as the VP for Tyler Perry's company, overseeing over 250 TV episodes. And in 2011, he produced Ava DuVernay's. I've been practicing that name all day. Still said it wrong. Middle of Nowhere, which won a Sundance 2014. He exec produced Selma, which was nominated for an Academy Award. and he also produced BET's final season of The Game, and also Origins, which is a film that I want to kind of ask and talk a little bit about. So fantastic and wonderful to have you here. How is it out in the States at the moment? You guys are about to go into elections, right? So it must be quite a
We
interesting
are.
time.
It's a very, very active time here, and great to talk to you, Simone.
Fantastic. Thank you. I'm kind of jumping straight into it. And like I said, please, guys, put your questions in chat. You went to Columbia. What was your kind of, hold on, excuse me a second. So you were like, you were educated at Columbia University. What shaped your path into film industry, and what were the kind of key lessons that you've learned from way back then that you've kind of, well, maybe not way back then, not suggesting you're too old, but from then that you're kind of bringing and that you kind of still keep alive with you now?
Sure. I was from Chicago, just not had no exposure to entertainment as a business coming up, and was starting to pay attention to different artists, names that were starting to pop up, people like Spike Lee, that were making film. Or it was the first time I was seeing people of color behind the scenes, where I recognized a name or a face. And in high school, I was introduced into the theater program, and understood the idea of commercializing art, of taking art and turning it into something where an audience would pay a ticket to come see it. And it intrigued me. It was so interesting to me that that was a real business. And right around that time, like I said, there was this real push for independent films in the US, with Spike Lee making his first film, She's Gotta Have It. And then a gentleman named Matty Rich, who made a movie called Straight Outta Brooklyn for like $25,000 on a credit card. And it made all the news. And it was like, oh, wow, like you could go out and make a movie, and it's something I could do. And it really caused me to want to pursue it in college. And so I ended up going to Columbia College, which has a very strong film program. Got into film, moved to Los Angeles, and never looked back.
Yeah. I mean, what were your early experiences in the industry that helped you develop your passion? Because a lot of the films that you make have a real social impact. What kind of helped you develop that kind of sense or that sensibility in the types of work you
Even from my early days in school, I really gravitated to trying to help people make product that just spoke to me. And unfortunately or fortunately, typically the stuff that had the most social relevance seemed to have the biggest challenge to get through the system of a green light. And so it was great for me to be able to use those tools of understanding production, and how to value engineer a process so that it would fit a numerical uh, uh, placeholder that whoever was financing it could feel comfortable that they'd make their investment back. And
Mhm.
so those were the projects that, for whatever reason, I seemed to focus on, because I was very interested in trying to figure out a way to make it work. And
Mm.
that was just a skill set that I, luckily tried to apply into that space. And I feel like, I guess looking back over my different projects, I am proud of a lot of the projects that we were able to move forward.
Yeah. Thanks. I mean, you've also worked with, obviously, you've worked with a lot of the greats. We kind of mentioned some of them that you'd worked with, like your Tyler Perrys, your Jamie Foxx, obviously, Russell Simmons, Lathan, those kind of. What are the kind of biggest lessons that you've learned from working on those types of projects, and how does that inform your work? I mean, you've been around for us here in the UK. That's a roster of such great names, and we kind of aspire to reach those dizzy heights in terms of kind of popularity of content. What kind of lessons have you learned with working with greats like that?
One of the things that I've continuously learned, and it always surprises me, because the media business has this kind of duality to it, where it wants to be popular, but it also wants to be art, and those two things sometimes conflict. And one of the things that I think is so magical that I've learned is that the power of art is that it can change the idea, the mindset of culture. That it influences culture versus the culture influencing art. And
Mm,
so we're able to tell stories. And you look at something like Origin, we're able to tell a story that may be unconventional, may be revolutionary in its application of how to display it. But what hopefully comes out of it is an audience can be influenced into thinking deeper about themselves or the way they fit into society or the way that they interact with each other, with people they don't know, with their own family. All these things are something that you can bring light to. And so I'm to me, one of the greatest lessons I learned is the power of what well executed art can do to society.
Which is really powerful. I'm going to go into origins because I mean, I'm a real fan of the film and definitely the concepts that it makes. I'd be really interested in chat to just put a kind of give us a little signal if you've watched the film. It'd be great to know what kind of drew you guys to the project. How did you get involved, and what drew you, and how did you guys get involved?
Sure. It was a book called
Yeah.
Cast, which was a bestseller that came out during the COVID shutdown,
Mm.
and it hit the New York Times bestseller. It became a very popular book to talk about. But if you've read the book, it's not a narrative story in the book. It really is a collection of observations and research. And so along the way, someone gave the book to Ava as like, hey, you should read this. It's really interesting and seems like right up your alley and something that you might want to tackle. She eventually read it and, she likes to say read it again and again. And this German of an idea came out that she could turn this non-narrative book into something that had a narrative story arc. And a lot of that was because she wanted to follow the trajectory of the writer, Isabel Wilkerson, and her journey, focusing on this idea of personal loss and how it connects to us as humans, but also tackling one of the biggest challenges we have in society, which is how we process and deal with the differences of who we are. And so it was such a big topic. It was very ambitious to think that we could turn that into a narrative story. But I
Mm.
think the script that Ava eventually kind of whittled out of that, um, just first time reading the script, was very excited about all the potential of how we could do it, what we could do, which is why, we really accelerated the idea of trying to get it done as soon as possible, just because we felt like this was a story that the world should have that, even if you haven't read the book, or like in the US, the book is banned in certain places.
It's
You
banned.
could still go see
Are
the
you
movie. Yeah,
are you
there's
serious?
states
It's
where
banned.
it banned in the sense of like it can't be used in education, can't be used in schools, can't be in libraries.
That is quite shocking. I mean, and if you guys haven't read Isabel Wilkins' cast, is it discontent? Was it discontent of our origins or something?
Yeah,
It
origins of
is
our yeah.
exactly that. It's absolutely sensational. I have brought it for most of our diversity workers that work in our industry, and I feel that you should, if you speak to Isabel, ask if I can have a little bit of a percentage because I have been promoting that book. I mean, that book is absolutely sensational. Why did you choose? I was really interested, and I know that we've gone about this before. Why did you choose not to do just a straightforward documentary like you did with 13th? 13th was amazing, and it was really clear and kind of cut to the point. And because the conversation is so rich and presents a different way at looking at race and racism, why not just a straightforward documentary?
I think Ava's goal in her initial desire to make it narrative was just the reach that narrative storytelling has. Documentary, which Ava does very competently, um, has an amazing ability of kind of succinctly giving you information, sharing ideas and stories. But it doesn't necessarily give you the same emotional attachment as watching characters, as watching actors display the emotion it takes. And in this particular story, she really saw the human side of it and wanted to make sure that it wasn't just documented in photographs, that it was documented in emotion, that these were real people who had real lives, and ideally an audience member who may not find docs as accessible as a movie would just go into this, see it as a movie, and come out with that same feeling and information as if it was a doc, but it gave access to a larger group of people to watch it.
Yeah, so just by doing it now, Tony, it's funny. We did an audience insight. And it was quite shocking how the difference between kind of unscripted and scripted, and how scripted really dominates the space. So I kind of
Yeah.
get that. Can you just give an overview for anyone who hasn't seen Cast, what Cast is, what was it about, what kind of story, or the premises? It'd be really helpful.
Sure, it really is kind of behind the idea of it is to tell the story of the system behind the scenes that orders the way that we live, that controls the way that we think about each other. And it's an adaptation of Isabel's book, where in the book she really delves with those systems of kind of three different views of the same system. The classical caste system from India, the slavery Jim Crow system that developed in the United States, and the Holocaust from World War II, and how all three of these things are related, interconnected, and the same thing. And if you start seeing those connections, you start to recognize that we do have some control over the way that we think and view each other, and that that is not something that is based in a truth. It's based in the organized idea of one group is better or higher than another. And the movie centers around the writer of the book, Isabel Wilkerson, as she gets introduced to this idea of trying to understand the Trayvon Martin shooting in the US. And it sparks this deep delve into understanding really this system around, uh, you know, the same thing that caused the Trayvon Martin shooting was the same thing that was the root of slavery, the same thing that's the root of the Holocaust. And while she's exploring this book, which takes her all around the world, the three closest people in her life pass away. And you start to try to reconcile this human story, this human existence with, from one particular point of view, the writer, and how it interconnects with all of us. And I think that idea of loss also plays into us understanding who we are as humans.
Yeah, no, it was I mean, it's such a powerful book, and I think it's such a powerful concept to look at race through the lens of caste. It really gives, like you said, it kind of makes you understand that there's power in just changing mindset. I thought it was really powerful. What were the biggest challenges that you had trying to bring in Origins to life, particularly
Uh,
addressing such complex social issues?
Obviously, there are many different paths to get productions greenlit. Our particular path took us as an independent film. And so I would say one of the biggest challenges initially is trying to um, build a production plan around a movie of what we wanted to have quite a bit of scope and scale in an independent film framework. And, part of that is you have to raise money, part of that is you have to budget smartly, and then as it transitions from, okay, we can raise the money, we can make the movie, then it's like, how do we distribute it, how do we get it out there? And so it's kind of a ongoing, I think, strategic problem. It starts with, how do you adapt this book into a screenplay, how do you turn this screenplay into something that you can film, how do you film it, how do you pay for it to be filmed? All these questions were kind of ongoing problems. I don't know if we had one overarching issue. It was more steps till we finally were able to get the movie produced and distributed.
And do you think that those some of those challenges were compounded because of the issues that it was dealing with, or those issues would have just been what you face when you're trying to do an independent film?
I mean, we joked a bit about, the idea of going in and pitching, hey, we got this great idea for a movie. It's going to be about slavery, the Holocaust, and Indian caste system. Um, it doesn't sound like a lucrative pitch if you say it like that. That said, when you really tear into it, what we were trying to tell a story about is people. It was a drama, and um, ultimately, I think that one of the reasons we decided to take it independent was that we wanted to tell the story with some authenticity without the pressure of a corporation that needs to service some element of an agenda. Where our only agenda was to try to do the best we could to adapt this book into something that could be metabolized by an audience. And so for us, the idea of making it independently really stood out as our best option. Not that a studio couldn't have done it, but I would say yes, it's a harder pitch to a studio, specifically at the dollar amount we wanted to spend on it, on them feeling comfortable with a black female protagonist, that they were going to make their money back, and it wasn't a comedy, it wasn't an action movie. it was a drama about social issues.
Mm, no, definitely, definitely. Kind of, how do you maintain the balance between story? How do you like with that story and the other films that you've made? How do you maintain the balance of kind of ensuring it has a broad appeal and that kind of reaches people, but it also has the authenticity and the social impact as well? How do you strike that balance?
I mean, I think the balance is really, initially developed when you write the script. And I think part of it is, with heavy issues, you have to write it in such a way where the characters, the nuance of who they are seems more rooted in reality versus tropes. Because then you start to recognize it. It doesn't feel foreign to you, and you stay more wrapped into it. But I think the visuals play a big part of it too, trying to find really compelling visuals to interconnect these stories and these characters, so that that emotional kind of arc of what it takes to get from the beginning, the middle, and the end of a story falls in the right place and invokes the right feelings, and you never feel like you're either waiting for the next thing to happen, or you're feeling like, that happened too long ago. Why am I still in this part of the story? So it's just trying to weave together, I think, all the different kind of leapfrogs that you need to make the story feel cohesive and move forward.
You were the producer on it. Yeah, is that right? You producer. What was your kind of role? What was your everyday? And we all know what producers are, but kind of what
Um,
role did you?
Yeah,
Yeah.
producers really kind of fall into two areas, and it's kind of physical production and creative producing. On this particular film, being that it was an independent film, it was just me and Ava. And Ava was the writer, director, and producer on it. So she brought her, very specific creative knowledge to how she wanted to do it. Then she and I worked together creatively to figure out how to pull it off. I've never worked on a production where you've had enough time or money. And so every time you go into that process, it really takes a lot of coordinated effort, I think, between the two different sides of the way you produce, the creative side and the physical side, to try to come up with a plan that hopefully gets you a production, an end result that looks and feels what you pitched, what you imagined it would be. I think the challenge you have is sometimes you try to bite off too much and you can't actually pull off the scale and the suspension of disbelief enough for people to enjoy it, or you spend so much time on that that you lose the story. And your costumes look great and everything looks good, but there's no story there. And so for us, me and Ava, it's really always trying to find that balance. What's the most we can do for the things that mean the most to the story, and make sure that that's where we invest our time and money. And how do we creatively do that? How do we, do a movie that a big chunk of it happens around the world, but obviously we can't go to every place every time something shoots, and we want to make sure that we pull off the authenticity. Okay, well, what are the things that we do need to pull off? So we do need to go to Germany to shoot this particular scene, but maybe we could pull off this scene that's supposed to be Germany in the United States, and come up with that balance, and really, like I said, creatively work together to come up with a plan that hopefully gives a movie that you see in the theaters. You watch it and say, "Wow, that was amazing," and you're not thinking about how we made it.
What impact did you hope that Origins would have on the global conversation around race, caste, and equality? How do you think the film contributed to that dialogue, and do you think you achieved that?
I mean, look, the life cycle of a movie is long, and we hope that the movie stays out there for a very long time and influences a lot of conversations. Based off of the interactions that we had with people who saw the movie, we feel strongly that it made a difference, at least in the value of understanding better of how to conceptualize the conversation about difference. And difference isn't just race. Difference could be religion, it could be geography, it could be socioeconomic, it could be sexual orientation. So many different things influence who we think somebody else is. And really, what we wanted you to come out of that movie with is, who do I feel like I'm better than? Who do I think I'm above? And maybe I can start looking at myself more than I look at others, to understand how we all fit together in society. And I think that was hopefully what we were able to convey when people saw the movie. And, to answer your question of do we think we did it? I mean, based on the reaction of the people that saw the movie, yeah, we think we did that.
No, I agree. So I think it's too. The people that I've seen the movie and definitely the book, we've had those kind of conversations in terms of cast and kind of understanding that. I know we've got a few questions coming. I just want to ask you a few more things before I kind of hand over to questions. Um, What uh, have you noticed any differences between the way UK and US producers? Any differences in terms of our style, our production style, our collaborations, our creative processes? Have you noticed any differences between how US producers and UK producers kind of tell their stories, deal with their work?
Yes and no. I mean, I think that the UK has, and it's more about the way that the industry developed in those two different places. I think the UK has a very rich, what I would call kind of art house cinema style to it, which really focuses on character and story, which is, a lovely thing to focus on. I mean, the US is very commercial in its application of it. We don't have the government to help with any of that. And so, usually, the ventures that the US promotes are something that transactionally is going to make its money, in full, without any kind of philanthropic or, national agenda to it, which sometimes can be challenging because that inherently causes us to lean into telling stories that fit certain models more than kind of breaking outside the box. And I think, in this new world, as we start looking at how storytelling, specifically to me around people of color, when you look at like, the US, the global South, the Afro European community, and the continent, I don't think there's a lot of synergy between our storytelling yet. And I
Mhm.
think this new world that we're starting to find ourselves in, we're still in the very early stages of understanding what media is going to mean and be in the next 10 to 20 years. What I hope is that we can start leveraging the things that we do well in the US and the things that you guys do very well in the UK together and start telling stories that we share amongst each other, that would, one, open up much bigger markets for us all, but I think also expose us to new styles and ways of storytelling that could be beneficial across the board for the medium as a whole.
No, I tend to agree. I tend to agree. Do you think there are any key challenges? What are the key challenges and opportunities that you can perceive if you were collaborating with kind of UK producers? Yeah, and particularly when tackling kind of projects that have kind of social or historic significance. Do you see perceive any challenges or any? What are the challenges, opportunities?
Yeah, I think the historical challenges still exist. That separation of these environments in the U.S. We are repeatedly told that no one really cares about our stories outside the U.S. And there's not an effort to market or push or move these stories away from the areas that they originated in. I think that's one of the strong parts about streaming is that it gives avenues of access across cultural lines, and allows people to see people who look like them with stories that they are familiar with. Maybe they have a different accent, and maybe they drive on a different side of the road, but the stories are similar. And so I think that the biggest challenge we have is just the historical nature of how we've been separated, from a media standpoint. But I think the strengths are, again, that's being democratized right now. And if we want it to be different, I think it's the time now to start having those discussions about, how do we tell a story, a hybrid story? I mean, the amazing thing right now is probably 5 out of 10, 6 out of 10 actors that are recognizable in the US right now are British, but they act in the US with US accents. Most people don't know they're British until they do the press and they end up on Jimmy Fallon or something. And it's like, oh, that guy's British. We don't even know it. And so I feel like there is this ability now to leverage that, to leverage the fact that, you know, you can take these actors from a different culture, from a different continent, bring them here, take actors from here, bring them there, and have more of a homogenous experience in cinema and television.
Yes, I would agree. Are there any particular strengths that you found in the UK production ecosystem that you think would benefit UK producers? Just
I mean, I
particularly.
think that Yeah, I think that one of the great things is that the UK, for better or worse, has never gotten spoiled with the kind of lavish production budgets that the US has had. And what that has caused is almost an inability now to be able to do things at a much tighter budget. And so I think the idea that from a cost effective standpoint, the UK is going to be much more shrewd about how to put a production together on a tighter margin. And that's a strength in this new market where, you know, we don't have the lavish production budgets anymore. And so, you know, I would hope and think that there could be many productions that could be shot in the UK for use in the US, just based on the fact that we're able to do it for a much smarter number.
Mm. Okay, well, I'm going to move to some questions. Sam, I'm going to invite you to come up on stage. I'll show you a question. Question is here. Can you see that question? Oh, can you see
Mhm.
that? Let me see. Sorry, let me see
Yeah,
it.
I see it.
Ooh, you can see it. Wonderful. And I'll invite Sam
Yeah,
on
how does
stage.
Array go about finding and supporting fresh talent behind the camera, especially from underrepresented groups? I mean, it's been a a big part of who we are as a collective, and it happens in many different ways. One is we have a company called Array Releasing, which we've put out almost 50 movies now, and those have been all movies of women or people around the world. And we release those in the U.S. and hope to have even a bigger footprint in the future on what and how to display those movies. And these movies are picked up at film festivals all around the world that aren't market festivals where studios don't go to buy them, but people want to put them out. And so those directors, and probably one of the ones that I feel like is the most well known now is Blitz, who did a movie that we picked up called Burial Kojo. Blitz was a director who was from Ghana. Um, After doing Burial of Kojo, we hired him to do one of our TV series. Along the way, Beyonce saw Burial of Kojo on Netflix from, I guess, when we had it out there. He was then hired to do part of Black is King. That led to Steven Spielberg hiring him to do Color Purple. And so
Wow.
that's a director who directly, you know, through that process of being identified, having content to get displayed, had his talent appreciated in a much more commercial way. And so that's just an example of how releasing, I feel like, you know, identifies and promotes people of color. But one of the other ways is like we do a lot of TV shows. We did one in particular that you can see the poster behind me called Queen Sugar, where we only based on Ava's, you know, really clear idea of what she wanted from this series and her partnership with Oprah Winfrey, um, only hired first time television director women who had done everything they should have done to get to get opportunities handed to them in other parts of their careers and never had those things really materialize. We were able to give them an episode of TV that gave them a platform. And many, if not most, of those directors are now moved on to much bigger and better things, opened up a whole new career avenue for them. And you know, for us, the benefit is that's the exact way that we want storytelling to happen. It shouldn't be a monolithic point of view when it comes to who tells stories. The variety of story and the style of the way you would tell a story would be totally different depending on who directs it. And so it's very exciting for us just to see, you know, the more people in that space, the more opportunity I think we all have on, you know, validating who we are and the stories that we tell.
Mm. Okay, there's another story. Let me show another question. We have a question from Lily. Do you want to jump on stage and answer it, Lily?
Yes, I do. Why not?
Mm.
Hi, Gina. I see your raised hand. I've seen your question. We'll get to you next. I promise you are after me. So are you using or do you like have an idea of how you may use like future tech in your productions? Obviously, there's been a lot of debate around AI, whether it's good or bad. But one of the great things about future tech is obviously virtual productions, that you can create a global crew. Is that
Sure.
something that Array's looking into?
Yeah, I think like many people working in industry, we're very eager to understand how these tools will affect what we do. I mean, AI is now kind of bleeding into almost every aspect of camera technology, post production. There's a great fear of it replacing actors and writers and all that. But I think that it is like many things, a tool. This gray beard probably proves I've been here for a bit of time. And I remember when, digital editing was going to be the end of the business, or when we went from film to digital cinema. There's always
For
been
real.
like this impending threat of how it's going to affect and stop us from being able to do what we do. It hasn't. And I'm positive that it won't this time. But I do think it's important, for all of us to understand these tools and start to innovate, because I don't think we should depend on corporations to tell us how these things should work with us. I think it's important for us to take control of them and use them how we want to use them. And that is going to be, I think, the major difference. I don't fear the day that technology uh, does art. I think technology will make it easier, and in some ways, it'll make it better for people of color, because we could use this technology to offset some of the risk that the studios inherently bias their decisions making on, because all the we got to do it cheaper, we have to do it faster. Now we're able to maybe to leverage some of these tools to compete on a more balanced playing field. It takes away some of that risk. So I'm very positive on the idea of how it can help us, but I think it's going to take us as a group, a collective group, to start using it and playing around with these things to understand it better.
I think that's a great question. I think that if anybody missed our AI and immersive session, we had Dr. Angela Chan talking about the new technologies coming in, and it says exactly the same as you. That even if you're feeling a little skeptical, it's important that you dive in, test it, use it, be part of it, rather than standing back and being frightened. All right, next, I'm going on to the next question. And this is Warres. Let me invite you on stage. Can you see that? Yeah. Wonderful. Ross is going to jump on stage with us in a second. Can you see that question? America, India, East Asia, and Turkey have all created work that can transcend into multiple territories, while British cinema is still a cottage industry unable to break glass ceilings mainstream cinema. Any idea why that is, or what's your thoughts on why that is?
I think timing is everything. It's hard to say exactly why that's the case. I do think that there's been a boom, like in the Asian cinema scene. Clearly, like if you look at the U.S. Emmys that just happened, I think Shogun, which was a series with a primarily Japanese cast, filmed in the native language of Japanese, won 18 Emmy awards in the U.S. There certainly is a new world in which I think there is opportunity for us to start crossing those lines. Some of it is just access. Some of it is, the thing that we can't really control, which is kind of like the cultural winds of what people are interested in, and what's become popular. But it only takes, I feel like, one or two of the right productions for that to change, for that wind to change. And the beautiful thing is a great history of great content on the UK side. And so when the zeitgeist wakes up to it being an area that is of interest, I think the great news is all of that material still is valuable. It doesn't lose its
Yeah.
value years later. I think it becomes more valuable because you have such a deep and rich library to pull from. And so I think it's just a matter of time. I don't think it's necessarily that it isn't or hasn't. I think it's just, when is it going to happen?
Paul, I just wanted to say I'm getting goosebumps just sharing an eye line with you. You're an icon. But I also feel like commercial feels like a dirty word in the UK, whereas cinema, like in America, it transcends markets and it connects to it boasts its ability to connect all over the world and sell over in so many territories. I always find we've got slightly a myopic vision of what cinema should be, and it's great that it's authored, and I love that in the UK that we protect the voice, but it also feels like if it becomes anything commercial, whatever, it feels like it's we're offending the material, the source. And with America, you made peace with that, and people in the hill tracts of Chittagong are watching some of these movies that are being made in the States in English. And I think that's a real interesting and powerful cinematic characteristic that America has, that we just don't seem to understand.
I think part of it is we just get a lot more swings at the bat. And so when you're looking at it, you're looking at the successes, but there's a tonnage happening.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And so, I wouldn't be dismayed. I honestly think that there is a timing for everything. And great material doesn't mean that people recognize it day one. And we had a little thing here at Array last week with Ed Zwick, and he has this thing about there's 4 determining factors to a great movie, and 3 of them don't matter. One is box office, how much it makes. One is awards, winning awards, and one is critics, what the critics say. He says none of those matter. The one that matters is time. And I think that is profoundly true. And there are many movies that people have seen that they have forgotten about.
Yes.
And so,
Yes.
let's not worry about those. The ones that stay with you, the ones that change the way that you see the world, the ones that influence the way that you interact with each other. I think those are the ones that will be here forever and influence the next generation of filmmaker too. So I would just say don't waver.
Okay.
Thank you,
Well,
Warren.
thank you. Thank you so much.
Next question. We've got quite a few questions to get through. I'm going to invite Natty to join us. Natty, if you can, if you can't, feel no way to just kind of he's joined backstage. He's coming up. Okay. Here, can you see that question, Paul?
Yeah, I can see it. Do you know or have you met any filmmakers in America that have a passion to make films in the UK or for the UK cinema audience? Yeah, I think that, there's a dream for every filmmaker I've met to be able to have something that plays in the UK. I think that from a business model standpoint, it hasn't been something that has been available to a lot of filmmakers. Again, like I mentioned earlier, when you look at the amount of British actors of color that work in the US, certainly I think there is the ability for that to happen. The way we make movies over here is a little different in the sense that we're very union regulated. We have a lot of different ways and processes to make movies, and a lot of filmmakers in the US aren't familiar with the process of filming in the UK.
Would you say would you say that there's a little bit more like unity over there, like amongst like the Black creatives in America?
I don't know if I'd say there's unity. There's certainly, I think partially because the process tends to be incestuous. People typically come out of a film school with a group of friends, or go through a film festival or some process that we have, that there is a kinship that's developed in like just groups of filmmakers. But yeah, maybe there's a bigger culture of it here that makes it feel like that.
Yeah, thank you. I'm gonna thank you. Gina, can I invite you up? Let me see if I can invite you up. Gina, hi Paul, nice seeing you again. How do you cope as a producer when dealing with the creation of emotionally intensive content?
Many of us have different ways of dealing with it. I think for me, it's about the ends for me. I look forward to the reaction of an audience, of the feedback from an audience. But I know, like when we were doing Origin, we had many very emotional images that we had to create, that we had to ask actors and crew to participate in recreating very traumatic incidents. Nothing of gore or anything like that, but just emotionally, so many people have connections, visceral, direct connections to some of those images.
Mhm.
Some of it happens, I think, as us attaching it as a group and having an ability to process it and talk about it. In this particular movie, we also did have a resource for crew or cast to be able to talk to an outside expert to figure out what to do with those feelings and emotions. And I look forward to the day where, those aren't the primary stories that we're telling, that
Exactly.
we're getting into a much broader aspect of what our existence is. I think the downside is a lot of times we focus on these very traumatic moments to justify the fact of what we're feeling. And we haven't
Mhm.
gotten into a place where we can express just, I want to do a love story. I want to do a thriller. I want to do it without any of those, attachments to it being socially relevant. But again, when you don't have as much content, I think you want to make sure that, if you're going to have it, you're saying something. But in the real world, hopefully there'll be a time where we aren't really focused on that. And but until we get to there, yeah, I think we have to
You got
just be socially responsible about those images that we're portraying, and make sure that not only we're doing it for an audience, but that the cast and crew who have to create them have some outlet to be able to manage that experience also.
Gina.
And
Yeah, good. Does that answer your
uh,
question?
sorry, yes, and I just quickly I brought up mental health because it's very well known that in the entertainment industry, in regards to movies and series, people are affected mentally when they get involved in these projects, and it shouldn't be taken lightly. And even though I am in the entertainment industry, I also have a master's in counseling, so I also deal with mental health. So I'm really happy that you were able to address it at your level, and thanks again. I'm happy to get some more knowledge from you, and I'm happy to see you again, Paul.
Me
Thanks so
too.
much, Simone.
Thank you so much for being here. Thank you. And you're all the way, you're coming in from LA, aren't you? Are you in LA
Yes,
at the moment? Where are you?
I'm in Los Angeles, yes. So it's
Yes.
11:18 a.m. right now.
My dear, you see this international audience that we're drawing such interesting conversation should be coming out of this network equals net worth. Thank you, Gina. It's lovely seeing you. Let me call Sharon to stage. Sharon, I don't know if you're able to speak, but I'll call you and then you can tell me. Oh, everybody's joining. Earlier on, Paul, nobody would join me on stage. It's probably I just don't have enough charm as you do, because like everybody wants to be on stage now. It's good to see people. With the question, here's the question. Sharon, you can ask the question yourself because you're here now. Please unmute yourself.
Color in who are, there seems to be a lot of people of color who are collaborating in the US. We really don't seem to have that same collaborative sort of take here, and I'm interested to know what the specific mindset you think you could point to, or a reason. And I'm just going to qualify that in saying that you mentioned a lot of big names there who are working together: Oprah, Beyonce, yourselves. It felt like, I feel that here there are a lot of big names, people of color, and actually everyone sort of just is very disparate and separate. But you there, and I think that's the same with music. But I'm interested to just get your take on if you think there's a particular mindset or a reason.
I don't know if I would be qualified to necessarily identify it on the UK side. I would say that, inherently, even though we do have a lot of collaboration, it definitely still is a mindset of more people than there are opportunities. Oh, hello. More people than there are opportunities. And I think, ideally what it'll take on the UK side is exactly what I think it takes on this side, is a lot of leadership and people who are in the space of having opportunity to start opening opportunities for other people. And start exposing kind of that next generation, even though you feel like you're bringing your competition in. In some ways, again, I hope that as the model is redefined in the future, it takes down some of those limiting walls and allows more opportunity for more people. Certainly over here, I think we've gotten to a point where we feel like that adage, that tide raises all ships.
Yeah.
And that is something that I think is true in this new world of, you know, endless entertainment. It's just a question of, there's not endless money. And so there's always still going to be a bit of a competition of how many movies can be made a year and how many filmmakers do you have. And if you have 100 filmmakers, but only 50 opportunities, that means half of that group is not going to ever get an opportunity.
Yeah.
And so, it is trying to promote a richer, more full business and hopefully grow it into, I don't know if there are a lot of outlets of for content creators of color that gives that forum for everybody to just put something out and be more competitive on trying to make sure I can reach an audience. And all those things might just be very US related in the sense of how things are set up here. But I do remember a time when the opportunities were narrow and it was way more I'm the special one, you're not kind of feeling. And that
Yes,
changes.
that's it.
Yeah, I know. And that changes. I think that, it does take some leadership. It'll take some key leaders to change that, to say, no, I'm going to, do honestly like Ava did with, hey, I'm going to only hire women directors who haven't got opportunities to do this. And it
Yeah.
outrages the establishment when you do that. So, but it's important to do.
But that's magnified here,
Yeah.
would be magnified if it was people saying people of color, which actually there's a long way to go here. I mean, really,
Right.
there is.
Yeah.
But yeah, anyway, thank you. And it's lovely to see you again
You too.
post Barbados.
Yes,
I
yes, you
think
too.
that I wonder, because we were having this conversation earlier on, the difference between kind of America and the US, and obviously America has this really big audience, and you can kind of survive as a creative. I'm imagining. So this is our stereotypes about the US. So you can correct me if I'm wrong.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
We imagine as a creative that you can survive just selling Black content to Black people in America because of the audience size. In the
Mm-hmm.
UK, you could not do that because there's just not enough of us here. So that's one of the first things. I also wonder whether the
Mhm.
difference. Sorry, go on. Ask me.
No, yeah, I was going to say that's partially true. I think we have the ability to have some sort of self-sustaining industry because of it, but the downside is our industry as a whole is a global industry. And so one of
Right.
our biggest limitations, as I mentioned earlier, is it's hard to get a movie or a television show greenlit because the feel from the establishment is that this content won't travel outside the US. And
Okay.
because of that, we can't greenlight it. Or after a season or two, it doesn't go any further. I mean, you look at like Queen Sugar, the series we did for 7 seasons here. Luckily, again, you're right. We were able to self-sustain that for 7 seasons, pretty much only on the US market.
You could never do that here because there's just not
Yeah.
enough audience. So that's the first issue. The other issue I wonder, I'm slightly controversial. I like others to chime in. The historically was slightly different. So in America, you guys, obviously from slavery, you kind of are Americans, vast majority. We were invited here in the 60s and 70s, 50s, 40s. So there's a slight different attitude. So we kind of constantly are trying to assimilate and be part, where I sense that because you guys have been kind of separated from day, that you've got infrastructures from very early that you have to do it on your own. So you're very independent and get things done, where we tend to kind of look to establishment and for them to look after us and bring us in. Again, a stereotype when looking into the States. So I'd love to, if that's
Yeah,
true.
I think there's some partial truth to that. I think that, there certainly is not a monolithic point of view for people of
Mm,
African descent here.
mhm.
We are a hybrid group, and there are a lot of people of color, mostly Black or people from the Caribbean that immigrated. And so you have a large portion of that because, I think, for all the criticisms about it, there are a lot of people who do immigrate to the United States. And so you also, I think, of the lineage of people from slavery, there isn't a real common um, acceptance of who we are and how we fit in here. That's a very controversial topic that's debated all the time.
But your
It
John
comes
Crow
up.
laws, though. But your John
Say it
Crow
again?
laws, like your John Crow laws and your separation laws that we didn't have. We're British, so we're very polite racism here, not so so overt. Yeah, so that
Overt,
kind of
yeah,
avert, yeah, that avert racism that you've got to be over there and you can't do this and you can't do.
yeah.
It gave an environment to create your own, right? No, yeah,
Well, for a while, yeah, but
yeah.
really, it was interesting. Like when you look back, to the Jim Crow era, where it was, and for those in the UK who aren't super familiar, the best way to describe it is it was a time in America where the concept was separate but equal. That the races should be separate, but because of our Constitution, each race should get an equal chance at it. The truth of the matter is, it wasn't equal, and it was just separate. But because of that, uh, African Americans couldn't go to, white restaurants or movie theaters, very much like apartheid. And that sparred a lot of Black businesses to run on their
Mhm.
own. You're absolutely
That's
right.
right.
The
That's right.
downside is when everything desegregated,
Mm,
many of those Black businesses were gone. So there were
right.
Black studios, Black movie studios, prior to desegregation, where they were making fully financed Black movies that played in Black theaters. Those all ceased to exist after Jim Crow.
Wow.
And so the downside is we did have that for a while, but it didn't necessarily survive desegregation. And then all of a sudden, from the 60s, 70s, and 80s, we were kind of thrust back into trying to compete on the mainstream, but at a deficit, at a feel like we were the discounted part of society. So
Mm,
everything, the culture was worth less, so we want to spend less on it. And so there was I think there's a backlash from those high days of having it. And even in this current election, you kind of hear a certain contingent of Black Republicans say, we should go back to Jim Crow laws. We were better then,
oh wow.
which wasn't
Mm.
true. But the truth of the matter was there was Black business. Unfortunately, it existed because of kind of this anomaly of the way that they recognized the law at the time, not
Mm,
because it was equal or thriving in the same way as any other business.
mm.
But anyway, but yeah, you're right. It's partially true, but it definitely has some
No,
downsides
maybe
to it.
not as clear cut. And I think the last thing, and I know Avril's got a question on that, we'll soon run out of time, that you guys seem to have a little bit more confidence. So originally, and again, this might be just my quite controversial. You guys have seemed to, for a long time, having a monopoly over the Black story because everybody kind of, you guys are so dominant. So with that has come a real confidence in your storytelling. When I think of, I watched, oh God, is it Tyrone? Who Cloned Tyrone and stuff like
Mhm.
that. You would never imagine something like that ever being greenlit anytime ever soon in the UK. Do you think that there's a kind of slight swagger in terms of your storytelling? Because you guys have been doing it for so long and have kind of held the responsibility of you, whether you liked it or not, being the Black global voice, right? So the Black American
Yeah.
story is kind of informed the Black story. Everybody kind of looks to that first, and it's only now that the European or the English voice is now being heard and identified as a Black British story rather than just a Black story. Yeah,
Yeah,
would
I,
you
I
agree?
I I think that's probably true. I think that we certainly. I think our confidence is more rooted in that we feel like there's a right to our story to be told,
That's great.
and that confidence probably, unfortunately, comes from another side trying to extinguish that
Mm,
story from being told.
mm,
And even to this day, what you're seeing is really a reaction to another force coming against us.
mm.
There's a common conversation right now in the US where it's like, we want to retell the story of what slavery was, and slavery was good. Slavery taught Black people lessons and skill sets.
Mm.
And that inherent ability for someone else who wants to tell our story, I think, causes us to push back and say, no, that's not our story. This is our story.
I
And
love
so that
that.
confidence is probably coming from more the oppression than it is from any inner strength that we have. I think it's coming more from us pushing equally against it.
I think wherever it's coming from, we love it and we respect it and we're inspired by it. I'm going to go to Avril, then we're going to round up because I appreciate we're kind of coming up to the time. Avril, let me invite you. I'm sorry, I haven't seen you for a minute. If you can't, just reject, don't feel any way. But while you She's joined backstage. She's coming. Avrils are coming. I'll let you answer your own question yourself. Hello, Avril.
Hi. I've never done this. Is the first time I've done this.
There's a first time for everything,
I'm a
Avril.
complete Luddite. Thank you so much, Paul, for joining us today. It's been a fantastic session. First met you at BFI, and it was your whole crew in lockdown. And it was so nice to see such a diverse group of heads of departments in a production company. So I'm a director, but I'm very intrigued to know what you as a producer or as a president of this company, what your decisions are based on. Is it passion or is it the markets? I'm sure you're going to say both, but if there is a story that you wanted to tell, would you F the markets and just go with it? I mean, I know you've done cast, for example, but
sure. Yeah, I don't think we ever inherently throw caution to the wind and don't care about, marketing this to people. What I will say is that generally, I think the overall impression of what people want is incorrect. And so I think we test that theory a bit by trying to tell stories in a different way. Certainly in how we represent our characters, we want to always represent characters in the nuance of the truth of who they are versus the stereotypes of what people are comfortable seeing them in. And so in that case, yes, we do push and say, hey, that's not the character or story we want to tell. That's not how we want to tell that story. We want to tell it like, this. And, I think for the most part, it works. I think there are times where, we hope that in the future it will be looked at as a great piece of work. But, we've had the unique opportunity to tell stories about real people, to tell stories about created people, but we just want to be able to control what that narrative is. And I would never say, like I said, we push against the market in the sense that we don't ever believe that it will be successful. And maybe only time will tell if it's true, but we do believe that our mission is to tell stories about characters that we know, that we really feel like we represent versus what society tries to display about who we are.
Fantastic. I'm going to sneak another one in.
Go on, then you're cheeky. You've got limited time,
Following on from that, Paul. So is in this new world where budgets are tighter, etc., and a lot of the studios are being risk averse, I'm assuming in America, are there films or content that they won't touch in terms of, I don't know, thrillers or depressing stuff? Or
yeah, I mean, I think that in general, it's still tough to sell any content with a person of color in the lead. There's a very, very short list of who those would be that the industry would consider bankable. I don't think in the new model that we live in the world that's gotten any easier. I think the business model is more challenged than it's ever been in our professional lives. But I do still look at it as an opportunity. And I think that, this is the time for us to collect as a global culture and not focus on the differences that have been taught to us about who we all are and what our existences are from where we're from, but really start focusing on the things that are very similar. And I don't care where I go in the world, I find people of color and I find similarities in our existence, in who we are and what we were taught. There are things that we
100.
accept as who we are that long transcend how we got where we are. And if we start focusing on those things, I think that all of a sudden we have a new era of storytelling that it won't be dependent on a corporation to decide whether it's a worthy story. But it's going to be up to us to start making those connections and trying to tell those stories. And maybe it'll take us literally all of us going around and saying, hey, I'm going to bypass the studio, the network, whatever. I'm going to go straight to the UK. I'm going to go straight to Africa. Let's get together. What story can we tell that all of us want to watch? And let's make it and get it out to each other. And I think that world will be a much better place than we've been.
Amen. Thank you
Amen.
very much.
And that was actually a really good night. I was going to ask you about, because when we spoke, Paul, you said something to me that really inspired me. And actually, if I'm honest with you, it's part of the energy of this festival. I asked you about the downturn, and how did you guys describe? Do you remember how you described it? How you guys are describing it in the UK? In the US, you said you're describing it as a disruption.
Oh, yeah.
I just found that so powerful, and wanted to really bring that energy to the festival. And I think you summed it up really well. It's our time, it's how we tell stories and how we work different. That we don't need to be waiting for the powers to be to give us permissions. So I'd like to thank you. And I love this comment. I'm going to share this comment because I just think it made me giggle a little bit. Paul is the original OG. Had to take off his slippers as he entered the Zoom out of respect.
That's funny.
Much
Much appreciated. Much appreciated.
Paul, thank you so much for being with us. It was amazing. Please, like I said, people are undoubtedly going to reach out to you via the DM if you can, if you've got the time to spare. Please reach out. We'd love to have you back. We'd love to continue developing our relationship with you. Excuse me. And finding out ways that we can collaborate with you. There's so many creatives here. We're really excited, and we've got lots of talent. I want to be able to tell stories. So, Paul, you're an OG. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
I really
so much.
appreciate it. Thank you.
Brilliant.